Hi everyone, welcome to week 4 of the course. This week I'm going to be showing you some more of the controls that are built into the iOS operating system, and specifically I'm going to be showing you how to use a segmented control, a slider, a switch and a stepper. So to start, we'll create a new project, and we're just going to start with a single view application. And this project we will call segmented control, and as usual make it for the iPhone and use automatic reference counting. Next, and I'll save it on the desktop. Okay, so as we've seen in previous weeks, we just have a single view controller with a .h file, a .m file, and a zip file, which actually is our view. This is what you will see on screen. So we'll make it split screen, because we're going to add some objects and then connect those objects up to the code. So if you come down here to the bottom of the right hand side and click on the third tab, we'll show our object library. And as I said, we're going to start by looking at a segmented control. So if you click and drag one of those out, and what we're actually going to do in this application is we're going to have 3 tabs in this segmented control, and based on which tab you touch, a different image will appear in the bottom half of the screen. So the other thing that we need from the object library is an image view, which is this one here. So we click and drag. Okay, so if we go back to this segmented control, when you click on the segmented control and look at the attributes inspector over here, there'll be a number of options that we can change the segmented control. And the first one is the style. So this one here is the plain style, but we've also got bordered, and all bordered does is simply, as the name suggests, it puts a border, a black border around it. A bar style, which makes it a little bit shorter, and it changes the highlighting on the segments. And then finally a bezeled, which is similar to the bar, but just a little bit taller. Now in terms of functionality, all of those 4 types do exactly the same thing. They just look differently. But we'll just use the plain style. And the next thing that we want to look at is the segments. And at the moment, it only has 2 segments. So we'll make it have 3 segments. Now there's 2 ways that you can change the title of each segment. The first way is by using these 2 options here. So you can see already that the first segment, the one on the left, is called first. And if we click on here, segment, the second segment is called second. So by selecting each of these segments, we can change the title. Now what we're going to do in this application is we're going to change the image in the image view based on which tab you select. Okay, so I've got 3 images that I'm going to import into Xcode in a little bit, and they are images of a football, a soccer ball, a rugby ball, and some hockey sticks. Okay, so I'm going to call the first segment football, and then I'm going to call the second segment hockey, and I'm going to call the third segment rugby. Okay, and the other way that you can change the title of a segmented control is simply by double clicking on it, and then you can change the title. Okay. So with this plain style of segmented control, you will see that there's these little handles on the side, so we can change the size of the segmented control. Okay, so what we're going to do is make it as wide as we can, and you'll notice, or hopefully you've been noticing through these videos, that as we move objects around the screen, that you get these nice alignment guides. Okay, and those alignment guides are there for a very, very good reason. They actually implement the Apple Human Interface Guidelines, and the Human Interface Guidelines are sort of unwritten rules that Apple has written that guide you on where to place objects like segmented controls on the screen, and those rules are based around how people interact with the objects. So, for example, these lines at the side here are there to say, don't move your object any closer to the edge of the screen than this line here, because if you do, it will make it difficult for people to touch the individual segment. Okay, so those guidelines there are for a very good reason. It doesn't mean that you can't break those rules, but they're there because Apple, when they were developing the iOS platform, figured out how people interacted with the device. So if you can follow those guidelines as much as possible, then your app will be much more user-friendly. And as I move closer to the edge at the top, again you'll see that blue line occur. And again, that's telling me, well, I probably shouldn't move it closer to the top of the screen, because it will make it difficult for people with their potentially fat fingers to select an individual segment. Okay, so we've named our tabs what we want them to be named, and next is I'll just resize this image view, and again take note of where the blue lines occur, and I'm just going to make this as big as possible. Okay. So the next thing that we've got to do is connect up these two objects to our code, and we do that in the usual fashion by controlling, click and drag. And to start with, we need an outlet for our segmented control, so I'm going to call this my segmented control. Connect. And I do the same for the UI image view. Control, click, drag. Want an outlet. My image view. Okay, so we've now connected up these two objects to our code. The next thing we want is an action, because what we want to do is, as you select each of these tabs, we want the image in this image view to change. So we need an action associated with this segmented control. So again, click, control, click, drag. This time we want an action. Okay, and we're simply going to call this change image. Now, one of the things to notice with the segmented control is this thing here, value changed. In previous weeks where we've hooked up actions to buttons, this has been touch up inside. Okay, so this is one of the fundamental programming differences between a button and a segmented control. And of course, as we've added this action and we've had the pop-up, Xcode knows that we're dealing with a segmented control, so it's automatically put this in for us. Okay, so we'll save all that. Now the next thing that we'll do is we'll actually import our images. Okay, so I've got 3 images here: hockey, rugby and soccer, or football. Okay, so select all those and then drag them into Xcode, and we'll put them in the supporting files folder. Okay, Now every time you import a file like an image into Xcode, it will present you with this drop-down dialog box, and it will ask you essentially, do you want to copy those files into your Xcode project? If you don't copy it, all you are doing is creating a reference to where the original files are. And what that means is, if you delete the original file, then the reference in Xcode will point to nothing and you'll get an error. Okay, so I usually check the box to copy the items. So that means if you delete the original file, you will still have the files in your Xcode project. Okay, so now we've got our 3 files. Okay, so if we hop over to the .m file, and all the coding that we want to do will happen within this change image method that we created before. So we've got 3 images that we want to appear in this UI image view. And so we need to tell Xcode what to do each time these segments are selected. Now we could do that with a series of if statements. So we could essentially say, if I touch the button called football, put the image called soccer into this image view. If I touch the segment called hockey, put the image called hockey into the image view. Okay, so you could do that. There's nothing technically wrong with that, but there is a better way of doing it, and that's with a thing called a switch statement. Okay, so if you type switch, it will present you with this template code. Okay, so this is the switch statement, and has an expression that is evaluated, and depending on whether this is true or not, it will then execute the case that is associated with this expression. So the expression that we have to evaluate is which one of these tabs is selected. Okay, so we have to make reference to this segmented control. So as usual, we say self dot and then whatever we've called our object, which is my segmented control. And then segmented controls have a property called selected segment index. Okay, and like we looked at last week, when we looked at arrays, the segments themselves are not numbered 1, 2, and 3. They are numbered 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so they start at 0. So the constant is going to be those particular numbers, so 0. And then if the selected segment index is 0, then whatever is listed here will be executed. Okay, so if we copy that and paste 2 more times, and then we change that to 1 and then 2, then we have our full switch statement. So if the selected segment index is 0, execute this statement. If the selected segment index is 1, which is this one, execute this statement. If the selected segment index is 2, which is this one, execute this statement. Okay, so to present our image into the image view, first of all we have to make reference to our image view. Okay, so self dot my image view, and then the image view has a property called image equals. Now we want to make reference to the actual image itself. Okay, and the class associated with the image is UI image.